In this lecture, we're going to take a look at the heart. The heart is the primary organ responsible for pumping blood throughout the body. It is located in the mediastinum, which is a cavity found between the lungs. The upper part of the heart, where the blood vessels enter and exit, is called the base. The point of the heart, or the bottom of the heart, is called the apex. The way the heart sits or is oriented in the body is that it is tilted to the left, or the apex points to the left. Next, we take a look at the functions of the heart. The primary functions of the heart is to pump blood and to separate oxygen-rich blood from oxygen-poor blood. Other functions may include pumping oxygen-poor blood to the lungs and pumping oxygen-rich blood to the body's tissues. In this illustration here, you can see that the right side of the heart is primarily responsible for pumping oxygen-poor blood, whereas the left side of the heart is primarily responsible for pumping oxygen-rich blood. Next, we take a look at the external anatomy of the heart. The heart has 4 chambers, 2 upper chambers and 2 lower chambers. The upper chambers are called atria, and the lower chambers are called ventricles. In this illustration here, you can see the right atrium and the left atrium. You can also see the right ventricle and the left ventricle. Next, we're going to take a look at the blood vessels that enter and exit the heart. The first set of blood vessels that we're going to look at are the blood vessels that carry oxygen-poor blood. The first blood vessel is called the superior vena cava. The superior vena cava drains oxygen-poor blood from the upper body and transports it to the right atrium. The next blood vessel is the inferior vena cava. The inferior vena cava drains oxygen-poor blood from the lower body and transports it to the right atrium. Next is the pulmonary trunk, which transports oxygen-poor blood from the right ventricle to the lungs via the pulmonary arteries. And finally, you have the cardiac veins, which transports oxygen-poor blood from the myocardium of the heart back to the right atrium. Please note that when discussing oxygen-poor blood, the color blue is usually associated with oxygen-poor blood. The next set of blood vessels are blood vessels that carry oxygen-rich blood. Please note that oxygen-rich blood is usually associated with the color red. The first blood vessels that carry oxygen-rich blood that we will mention are the pulmonary veins. Pulmonary veins carry newly oxygenated blood from the lungs back to the heart into the left atrium. The next blood vessel is the major blood vessel that transports oxygen-rich blood from the heart to the body. This is called the aorta. And finally, the last blood vessels that carry oxygen-rich blood are called the coronary arteries. The coronary arteries transports oxygen-rich blood from the aorta to the myocardium of the heart. From an internal view, you can see all 4 chambers. Remember, the 2 upper chambers are called the atria, and the 2 lower chambers are called the ventricles. So once again, here's the right atrium, the left atrium, the right ventricle, and the left ventricle. As mentioned before, one of the functions of the heart is to separate oxygen-poor blood from oxygen-rich blood. This means that there must be a wall between the 2 atria and a wall between the 2 ventricles. The chambers of the heart are separated by a septum. A septum is a wall of myocardium. Between the 2 atria is a wall of myocardium called the interatrial septum. In this diagram, it's difficult to see the interatrial septum because the aorta and the pulmonary trunk are obstructing your view. Next, between the 2 ventricles is a wall of myocardium called the interventricular septum. There are other structures associated with the chambers that you can see from an internal view of the heart. 2 structures that we're going to mention are found in the ventricles of the heart. The first structure that we're going to mention is called the papillary muscle. Papilla means nipple in Latin. So papillary muscles look like little elongated nipples that extend from the walls of the ventricles. The next structure found in the ventricle is called the chordae tendineae, or heartstrings. Together, these 2 structures are going to play an important role in closing atrioventricular valves. Once again, we'll talk about the blood vessels that carry oxygen-poor blood, this time looking at them from an internal view of the heart. The first one is the superior vena cava, followed by the inferior vena cava, the pulmonary trunk, and the pulmonary arteries. Cardiac veins cannot be seen from an internal view of the heart since they're found on the surface of the heart. Next, we'll take a look at the blood vessels that carry oxygen-rich blood from an internal view of the heart. The first blood vessels are the pulmonary veins, and then the aorta. Coronary arteries cannot be seen from an internal view since coronary arteries are found on the surface of the heart.